The wind hit like a warning that morning, sharp and honest, the kind of cold that slips through every layer and reminds you where you are. Isaiah Bennett stepped out of his apartment building with a lunchbox in one hand and his daughter's mittened fingers in the other. The sky above the TTC tracks was a dull gray bruise stretching across Toronto, and the train screeched somewhere in the distance like the city hadn't quite decided to wake up. He crouched to fix her scarf, the edges stiff with frost. "Hold my coffee, Maya," he said. The cup steamed between her small gloves. The red maple leaf logo faded from too many night shifts. She looked up at him, eyes wide, with that curious seriousness only children have. "Dad, what do you actually do at work?" Isaiah smiled, the kind of smile that made lines deepen at the corners of his eyes. "I fix things." "Everything?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded softly. "Everything I can." The train doors opened with a hiss, and they slipped inside, finding 2 seats by the window, the kind meant for people who didn't take up much space. As the city blurred past, frozen lawns, shuttered bakeries, a Tim Hortons, glowing in the half-light, Isaiah thought about the night he'd just finished. Boilers humming, elevators that stalled, a world that only worked because someone like him made sure it did. He glanced at Maya's reflection in the window. Half her mother's eyes, half his quiet patience. He'd promised her a better life, even if some days it felt like he was just keeping the cold out long enough to try again. When they reached downtown, the streets were already alive. Men in pressed coats moved like currents. Women with coffee cups walked fast enough to outpace the cold. The air smelled like diesel and ambition. Isaiah kissed his daughter's forehead before she ran toward the school gate, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. "Be good," he called. "I always am," she shouted back, her voice bright against the gray. He laughed quietly, then turned toward the street, tucking the empty coffee cup into his jacket pocket. "Don't litter, don't leave traces. That's how you stay invisible." High above the same street, on the 31st floor of Mapleworks FinTech, Claire Whitfield stared out at the skyline through glass that made the world look distant and perfectly arranged. The boardroom around her smelled of espresso and exhaustion. CFO Gavin Roy leaned back in his chair, gray hair and a voice that could cut glass. "Claire," he said, his tone smooth, but heavy with condescension. "We need someone with experience, not just enthusiasm." She kept her hands folded, her jaw still. "Experience doesn't always mean progress." Gavin smiled in that way men smile when they think patience makes them right. "It does when shareholders are nervous. You're talented, no one doubts that. But this company needs stability, not sentiment." The words landed like a slap disguised as advice. Claire had spent her 20s fighting to be taken seriously in rooms like this, and somehow the higher she climbed, the more invisible she felt. Around the table, the other executives nodded politely, their silence as heavy as their suits. The meeting moved on, a blur of charts and projections, but her mind stayed elsewhere, back at the window, on the world she could see but couldn't quite touch. Outside, Isaiah walked past the revolving doors of the same building, his steel-toed boots crunching against the ice. He looked up at the glass tower, sunlight catching the mirrored surface, reflecting everything except the people who cleaned it. Somewhere up there, he thought, were the ones making decisions that trickled down like melted snow, never quite reaching those who needed warmth the most. He pulled his collar higher, turned the corner, and disappeared into the crowd. Inside, Claire pressed her hand against the cold pane of glass, her breath fogging the reflection for a moment before it vanished. Below her, the city pulsed with life, messy, unpredictable, real. She couldn't name it yet, but something in her had begun to shift. And somewhere down on that same street, Isaiah kept walking, unaware that by the end of the week, a single paper cup would connect them. Two strangers, separated by class and circumstance, each searching for meaning in a world that rewarded silence. The city kept moving, trains rattling, people rushing, the wind carrying secrets between those who looked up and those who looked away. The building always felt different after midnight. The hum of the day, the meetings, the chatter, The elevator dings, faded into a silence, thick enough to hear the heat running through the vents. Isaiah liked that hour. The city above was asleep, but down here, the quiet made sense. He pushed his cleaning cart through the glass corridor of the executive floor. Lights dimmed to half power. Reflections of the skyline shimmered faintly against the windows, as if the world outside were watching. He didn't expect anyone to still be there. But when he turned the corner, Claire Whitfield was sitting at her desk, the glow from her laptop painting her face in tired light. Piles of documents surrounded her like sandbags in a flood. She didn't look up until he spoke. "You're still here." Her head lifted, startled for half a second before she caught herself. "So are you." Night's my shift," he said, voice calm, unhurried. So she gave a small, strained smile. "Guess it belongs to you, then." He shrugged. "Day takes enough from everyone else. Night's just quieter." The clock on the wall ticked, the only other sound between them. Claire rubbed her temples, closing her laptop halfway. "I envy that," she murmured. "The quiet." Isaiah nodded, moving to the corner table to wipe down the surface. His movements were steady, practiced, like a man who found peace in small, complete things. He didn't pry. He never did. But as he cleaned, he noticed the way she kept staring at the screen, not typing, just breathing like someone holding back something heavy. When he finished, he straightened the chairs one by one. "Long night," he said. She let out a short laugh that sounded closer to a sigh. "A long year, really." He nodded, picking up his cart. "Then maybe the next one starts better." For a moment, neither moved. It wasn't a romantic pause, just human, two strangers sharing the same quiet in a world that didn't make much room for it. Then he gave a polite nod and left, the echo of his steps fading down the hallway. By morning, the office had returned to its usual rhythm. Emails pinging, phones ringing, the world pretending nothing had ever stopped. Claire arrived earlier than usual, clutching her coffee like armor. When she reached the break room, she paused. The stainless steel machine gleamed more than she remembered. Beside it, a stack of clean mugs stood neatly aligned, and taped to the edge of the counter was a paper cup, her cup from last night, with 5 words written in careful block letters. "Don't let success make you forget how to love life." She stared at it longer than she meant to. The handwriting was precise, deliberate, as if every letter mattered. She didn't know why, but the words landed somewhere deeper than the usual motivational quotes that littered corporate walls. Maybe because it wasn't trying to impress anyone. It was just true. When Isaiah came in that evening, he found a yellow post-it stuck to the espresso machine. The handwriting was different, smaller, rounded, a little rushed. It read, "Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers." He didn't smile right away. He read it twice, then 3 times, before a quiet grin curved at the edge of his mouth. It wasn't the kind of note meant for praise or pity. It was recognition, an echo. That night, when he mopped the marble floors outside her office, she was gone, but he could still feel her presence, the faint scent of coffee, the restless energy that lingered in the air. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a clean paper cup from his supply cart, and with the same neat handwriting, wrote another line. "The world doesn't change all at once. It starts small, with someone noticing." He left it on her desk beside a closed laptop and turned off the light as he left. The next morning, Claire found it waiting for her. The ink slightly smudged from his hands. She held it as if it were fragile, then set it beside her monitor, next to her family photo and the fountain pen her father had given her when she got promoted. Somehow, it belonged there. No one else in the building knew about the quiet exchange that had begun. One paper cup, one post-it at a time. But for Isaiah and Claire, it was the first honest conversation either of them had had in months. 2 people on opposite sides of power, writing to each other in a language the world had forgotten, kindness, and neither of them realized that the smallest words, written after hours, were already rewriting everything that came next. The night shift always started the same way, fluorescent lights humming, the low drone of machinery echoing through the vents, and Isaiah Bennett, checking his clipboard as the rest of Toronto fell asleep. Down in the mechanical wing, the air smelled faintly of metal and detergent. He found Andre Ung, the building's operations chief, standing beside a control panel, glowing like a small galaxy of blinking lights. Andre had been there longer than anyone. Calm, meticulous, with a dry humor that only surfaced when the night dragged on too long. "Boiler's acting up again," Andre said without looking up, like an old man complaining about the cold. Isaiah chuckled, kneeling to inspect the pressure gauge. "Well, we all creak a little in winter." "Yeah," Andre muttered. "Difference is, no one thanks the boiler for keeping them warm." Isaiah glanced at him. "Or the people fixing it." Andre finally looked over, his face, lined but kind. "We make the lights shine, but no one ever sees who flipped the switch." The words hung in the air. Isaiah didn't answer, but something in him tightened. He thought about the emails that never had names, the work orders signed by departments, not people. The building ran because of men like them, hands calloused, voices calm, unseen. Upstairs, Claire Whitfield walked the hallway of the executive floor, the echo of her heels steady against the marble. She'd been leaving earlier lately, trying to prove to herself that she could live outside spreadsheets and deadlines. But tonight, something kept her wandering. As she passed the janitorial supply room, she caught sight of two custodians stacking fresh towels into carts. "Good evening," she said, her tone soft but certain. Both froze, surprised. One of them, Maria, a Guatemalan woman who'd worked there 7 years, blinked before smiling shyly. "Good evening, Miss Whitfield." Claire nodded and kept walking, her pulse strangely quick. It had been such a small exchange, but it stayed with her longer than she expected. In the elevator, she noticed the security guard holding the door. "Thank you, Thomas," she said, reading his badge for the first time. His startled grin told her no one ever bothered to. The next morning, Claire stood in line at the loading dock cafe for a coffee, the only place open before dawn. The delivery driver in front of her, older, Somali, wearing a jacket that had seen too many winters, looked back at her nervously. "You don't have to wait behind me, miss," he said. She shook her head. "Why not? You were here first." He smiled, almost embarrassed. "Most people don't notice I'm here at all." Later that day, in the boardroom, CFO Gavin Roy flipped through the latest expense report. "We're overspending on maintenance," he announced. "I'm cutting the night shift overtime." Claire looked up from her notes. "You can't. Those shifts keep the building running." He gave a slow, pointed smile. "You've been spending a lot of time thinking about the cleaning staff lately. Everything okay?" Her jaw tightened. "Yes. Just making sure we value the people who keep us standing." "That's not your department, Claire. You're the CEO, not a social worker." She kept her tone even, but her eyes were steel. "It's everyone's department when it defines who we are." Gavin leaned back, tapping his pen against the table. "Look, I admire your empathy, but this company runs on results, not sentiment. Don't turn compassion into a PR exercise." She stared at him for a long second. "It's not PR when it's real." The room fell quiet. The other executives avoided her gaze, preferring the comfort of spreadsheets over confrontation. Gavin finally shrugged. "Suit yourself. Just remember, perception matters." When the meeting ended, Claire stepped into the hallway, her chest tight with frustration. She'd faced worse from men like Gavin, condescension wrapped in politeness, but this time something had shifted. It wasn't just about respect, it was about truth. That night, Isaiah and Andre sat on overturned crates in the maintenance bay, sipping coffee from paper cups that steamed into the cold air. "You ever wonder," Andre said, eyes on the machinery, "why people act like the world's divided into those who build it and those who matter?" Isaiah thought for a moment. "Maybe because it's easier that way. If you don't look down, you don't have to feel guilty," Andre chuckled quietly. "You sound like a poet for a guy who fixes pipes." Isaiah smirked. "Pipes and people, they're not that different. Both break when ignored." Andre nodded approvingly. "You're not wrong, brother." Later, when Isaiah wheeled his cart back up to the executive floor, he noticed something new. A folded towel, a box of donuts left near the supply room door with a handwritten note. For the night team, thank you. The handwriting was small, curved, familiar. He smiled faintly, tracing the letters, before turning off the lights. Upstairs, in her office, Claire watched the city glitter against the black glass. From this height, everything looked perfect, organized, shining, complete. But she knew better now. Perfection was built on people who went home in silence, before dawn. Somewhere below, Isaiah walked through the hall, his reflection sliding across the polished marble, invisible to most, but not to her, not anymore. The next morning when Gavin passed her in the lobby, he noticed something different. She was smiling, not the polite corporate kind, but the quiet, grounded smile of someone who had stopped pretending that success meant standing above. He didn't understand it. He didn't have to. The lights above them flickered once, steadying again, and for the first time, Claire thought she finally knew who kept them shining. The boardroom at Mapleworks, FinTech, looked like something out of a design magazine. Glass walls, sleek, walnut table, lights bright enough to erase shadows. But this morning, the light felt cold. Numbers glowed from a digital projector, while faces stayed still, detached. Gavin Roy stood at the head of the table, immaculate as always, his tone smooth and practiced. We need to tighten operations, he said, clicking through the slides. Our Q4 forecast shows strain across multiple divisions. Cutting the overnight maintenance program could save nearly $400,000 annually. No one reacted at first. The statement hung there, sterile, efficient, like a surgeon's cut. Claire Whitfield sat midway down the table, her pen frozen above her notebook. She could feel the shift in the air, the subtle nods of approval from other executives who measured compassion in dollars. Gavin continued. Look, we all appreciate the janitorial and technical teams, but after hours, this place doesn't require full staff. The building's automated. We're not running a charity. The words snapped something inside her. She set her pen down and leaned forward. Not a charity, she repeated, slowly, and as if testing the weight of it. Tell me, Gavin, when's the last time you stayed after midnight to see what actually happens in this building? He blinked. Excuse me? You said it yourself, the building's automated. So who fixes the systems when automation fails? Who resets the security panels, unclogs the HVAC filters, makes sure the servers don't overheat while we're home asleep? Gavin's smile stiffened. That's beside the point. No, she said firmly, her voice steady but sharp. That is the point. The work we never see keeps this company alive. You might not remember their names, but if they stopped for just one night, this entire tower would shut down before sunrise. The room went still. For a moment, even the hum of the projector seemed to fade. Across the table, the head of operations cleared his throat softly. Someone tapped their pen, uneasy. Gavin's expression didn't change, but his eyes flicked toward her with the kind of irritation that comes from being challenged in public. Claire, with respect, emotional arguments don't balance ledgers. Neither does arrogance, she replied. The words slipped out before she could stop them, but she didn't regret it. He exhaled through his nose, a hint of a smile. I'll assume that was passion speaking. Assume whatever you want, she said, sitting back. But you might start by assuming those people matter. No one spoke. The meeting carried on in awkward silence, every topic after that landing with dull weight. When it ended, the executives filtered out quickly, pretending to check phones, grateful for the distraction of digital noise. Claire remained seated, eyes fixed on the table. She could see faint reflections of herself in the polished surface, a woman who had everything on paper and yet felt increasingly hollow. Maybe, she thought, leadership wasn't about being untouchable. Maybe it was about standing close enough to the cracks to see what held everything together. Down below, in the belly of the building, Isaiah Bennett had no idea his name had just been part of a fight he couldn't witness. He was crouched beside a leaking pipe, hands damp and cold, flashlight between his teeth. The valve refused to turn. stubborn from years of corrosion. He pressed harder until it gave, releasing a hiss of steam that fogged the air. Old building, Andre muttered behind him, checking the gauges. She's got bones, but they're tired. Isaiah nodded. Still standing, though. That's what counts. Andre smiled faintly. You sound like you're talking about yourself. Isaiah chuckled under his breath, tightening the final bolt. Maybe I am. He wiped his hands on his work pants, unaware that, upstairs, someone had just risked her standing to protect his. That evening, after the office lights dimmed and the corporate floors emptied, Claire lingered. The echo of her own words replayed in her head. They might not remember their names, but if they stopped for one night, this entire tower would shut down. She walked past the darkened offices, heels clicking softly, until she reached the elevator that led to the maintenance levels. For a moment, she hesitated. She wasn't sure what she expected to find. Maybe nothing, maybe the truth. The doors opened to the muted hum of machinery and the faint scent of grease and detergent. She stepped out carefully, her polished shoes out of place on the concrete floor. A distant radio murmured old soul music. Somewhere down the hall, a mop bucket rolled, steady and rhythmic. Isaiah turned the corner, startled to see her. Ms. Whitfield, he said, straightening instinctively. Claire, she corrected gently. You're still working. Always, he said with a small grin. Night's got a way of keeping me busy. She nodded, glancing around. Pipes, wires, tools, the unseen veins of the building. I just wanted to see what keeps us running, she said. Isaiah tilted his head, curious but kind. Most people don't look. Well, she said quietly, maybe that's the problem. He smiled, a quiet understanding passing between them. She didn't stay long, but as she rode the elevator back up, she realized something had changed. Not in the building, in herself. The next morning, when Gavin presented a revised version of his report, the overnight maintenance line was still intact. No cuts, no mention. He didn't look at her, but she caught the subtle tightening of his jaw. The victory was small, invisible to everyone else, but for once, she didn't need applause. If you've ever worked a job where no one says your name, take a moment to think about the hands that hold your world steady. The lights above you, the clean floors beneath you, the warmth in winter, it all exists because someone showed up quietly to keep it that way. Maybe today's a good day to notice. The storm didn't start with a shout. It started with a photo. Zoe Tran, junior marketing associate and part-time gossip enthusiast, was refilling her water bottle early one morning when she noticed something curious on the CEO's desk. A paper cup. Ordinary, except for the words written across it in careful, tidy handwriting. She leaned closer, pretending to tidy the counter. The message read, "The world doesn't change all at once. It starts small, with someone noticing." It wasn't signed, but the handwriting looked personal. Zoe tilted her head, snapped a quick photo on her phone, and smirked. By 8:15 a.m., the picture was posted on the company Slack channel under Duggar Random Happenings, captioned with a single line. CEO has a secret admirer from the night shift? At first it was just a joke. Laughing emojis trickled in, followed by a few curious comments. Maybe it's corporate poetry hour. At least someone's got romantic handwriting. Plot twist. The CEO's inspiring herself. But jokes are never just jokes in an office built on whispers. Within an hour, the post had over 100 reactions, and by lunchtime, it had been screenshotted, reposted in private chats, and even forwarded to a few external vendors. People loved a mystery, especially one that involved someone untouchable. Claire heard about it halfway through a meeting when her assistant, Katie, leaned over and whispered, "You might want to see this." She passed her phone under the table. The image filled the screen, her desk, her coffee cup, her handwriting staring back at her, now surrounded by a cascade of emojis and speculation. Claire's stomach sank. She set the phone face down, keeping her composure, as Gavin continued his presentation about risk management optics. The irony didn't escape her. When the meeting ended, she excused herself quietly and stepped into the corridor, the air suddenly too thin. Katie followed. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "It's spreading fast." "Let it," Claire replied, her tone controlled but distant. "People will move on once they get bored." But deep down, she knew better. The internet never got bored. It only evolved. By the next morning, the whispers had shifted from amusement to insinuation. Two engineers passing in the hallway exchanged knowing looks. A designer joked about after-hours meetings. A senior analyst muttered that professionalism wasn't what it used to be. In the cafeteria, someone asked, half laughing, "Do you think it's true?" Another replied, "I mean, she's always here late, you never know." The laughter was easy, casual, but it carried weight. Every chuckle built another brick in the wall of rumor. Downstairs, in the maintenance wing, Isaiah noticed the difference before he even knew the cause. People greeted him less warmly. Conversations cut short when he entered the room. Andre, usually relaxed, seemed uneasy. "Something going on I should know about?" Isaiah asked. Andre sighed, avoiding eye contact. "Probably nothing. Just people being people." "Meaning?" Andre hesitated. "There's talk. About you and up there." He gestured toward the ceiling. Isaiah frowned. "Up there?" "Yeah, the boss. The cup notes. Someone took a picture." The words hit like a quiet punch. "You're kidding," Andre shook his head. "Wish I was. HR's already poking around." Isaiah leaned back against the wall, staring at the concrete floor. "All this over a cup." Andre gave a humorless laugh. "Doesn't take much to make noise in a place that hates silence." Later that day, in the HR department, Sonia Patel received an email from an anonymous address. The subject line read, "Concern after-hours activity." The message was short, one sentence. "Watch who you let into the CEO's office at night." She read it twice, her stomach tightening. HR policies didn't cover this kind of thing neatly. There was no checkbox for kindness mistaken as scandal. But protocol demanded documentation. She filed a report, marked it confidential, and scheduled a meeting to clarify expectations. Meanwhile, upstairs, Claire stared at her reflection in the glass wall of her office. The city shimmered behind her, bright, indifferent. She'd spent years learning how to stay composed under scrutiny, how to turn whispers into white noise. But this was different. This wasn't about her performance or her leadership. It was about her humanity, and how threatening that looked in the wrong hands. As the sun set, she walked to the break room, the same one where Isaiah's notes had begun. The counter gleamed, empty now. She poured herself a cup of coffee, black, no sugar. The bitterness steadied her. Across the city, in his small apartment, Isaiah sat at the kitchen table staring at his phone. No messages, but the silence felt louder than words. Maya, coloring nearby, glanced up. "You okay, Dad?" He forced a smile. "Yeah, sweetheart, just tired." But fatigue wasn't the right word. It was something heavier, the weight of being seen for the wrong reasons, after a lifetime of being invisible. In the building that night, laughter echoed faintly down the glass corridors. A rumor had taken shape, and, like all things born from fear and curiosity, it wouldn't stay quiet for long. The call came just after lunch, one of those politely worded emails that said everything without saying anything. "Please report to HR at 2 p.m. for a brief conversation regarding professional boundaries." Isaiah stared at the screen for a long time before closing his laptop. Around him, the maintenance office hummed with routine, the hiss of the boiler, the clatter of tools, Andre's quiet voice on the phone. Everything felt normal, but the air around him had changed. He could feel it, that quiet shift people make when they know something you don't. When the elevator doors opened on the 12th floor, the temperature seemed to drop. The HR department smelled faintly of coffee and copy paper, all sterile calm and soft edges. A receptionist with a careful smile led him to a small, glass-walled room. Inside sat Sonia Patel, head of human resources, her expression professional but tight. Across from her, a second rep, someone Isaiah didn't recognize, was already flipping through a folder. "Mr. Bennett," Sonia began, gesturing to the chair. "Thank you for coming up." He nodded, sitting. I didn't realize there was an issue. This isn't disciplinary, she said quickly, the kind of reassurance that always meant the opposite. We've received some concerns about interactions between you and senior leadership, specifically Ms. Whitfield. Isaiah folded his hands, resting them on his knees. Concerns? Yes. Sonia adjusted her glasses. There have been questions about boundaries, about the appropriateness of certain exchanges during after-hours shifts. He let out a slow breath. You mean the notes? Sonia glanced at her colleague, who gave a small nod. We understand there have been messages exchanged. They were just words, he said quietly. Encouragement, kindness. Intentions aside, she replied, her voice even but cool. Perception matters. You understand, of course, there are professional boundaries in place for a reason. Isaiah looked at her, not angry, not even defensive, just tired. I do understand boundaries, he said, but if a kind word is what crosses the line, maybe the line's been drawn in the wrong place. The second rep shifted, uncomfortable. Sonia exhaled through her nose, a flicker of frustration in her eyes. I appreciate your perspective, Mr. Bennett, but we have to consider how it looks, for you and for Ms. Whitfield. How it looks, Isaiah repeated, the phrase catching in his throat. Not what it is. Silence fell. The hum of the HVAC filled the room like static. Sonia clasped her hands. You've been an exemplary employee for 3 years. This isn't personal, it's policy. We just need to ensure everyone's comfortable moving forward. He nodded slowly. So what happens now? We'll be issuing a formal warning, she said. It's not punitive, it's procedural. You'll sign an acknowledgement that the discussion took place. No suspension, no penalty, just documentation. Isaiah stared at the thin stack of papers she slid across the table. His name printed neatly at the top, followed by paragraphs of language, so careful it barely sounded human. Words like perception, professional decorum, conduct expectations. He read the first line twice, before setting the pen down beside it. This feels like you're asking me to apologize for something that wasn't wrong, he said. Sonia's tone softened, but her words didn't. Sometimes, perception becomes truth, faster than facts do. He gave a faint, incredulous laugh. That's exactly the problem. The pen felt heavy in his hand. He hesitated, then signed. A simple loop of ink that carried the weight of every unspoken truth beneath it. The moment passed slowly, almost cinematic. The hum of the air vent, the faint creak of the chair, the soft click as Sonia gathered the papers back together. Thank you, Mr. Bennett, she said. We appreciate your cooperation. He stood, nodding politely. Of course. When he stepped into the hallway, the light seemed harsher, the air thinner. He walked past open offices where people chatted over screens, their laughter faint but distant. The world upstairs was spotless, ordered, efficient, and yet it had never felt dirtier. Back in the elevator, he caught his reflection in the brushed steel doors, eyes weary, jaw tight. He wasn't angry at Sonia. She was just following the rules. It was the rules themselves that bruised him, the invisible kind written by people who never had to live under them. Downstairs, Andre was waiting, leaning against a cart. How bad? He asked. Isaiah gave a tired shrug. A warning. Paper trails? It always is. Andre shook his head. They don't like it when the wrong people start being seen. Isaiah didn't answer. He walked toward the mechanical room, the hum of the pipes greeting him like an old friend. He sat on the edge of his workbench, elbows on his knees, and stared at his hands. They were steady, capable, the same hands that kept this tower breathing. And yet, somewhere above, someone had decided they were dangerous. Later that night, when he clocked out, he passed by the break room. On the counter sat a single cup, plain, untouched. He paused, then took out his pen and wrote a line across it. Even silence leaves fingerprints. He set it down gently and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the empty hall, the hum of the lights following him like a faint pulse. The email went out on a Tuesday morning. Subject line simple but jarring. All hands town hall, 4 p.m. Attendance, Required. By noon, whispers were already circling the glass corridors of Mapleworks. No agenda was listed, no context. Just the CEO's signature at the bottom, Claire Whitfield. By 4 o'clock, the auditorium on the ground floor was full. Rows of employees, engineers, accountants, marketers, custodians, all packed into the same space for once. The air was heavy with curiosity, skepticism, and the faint hum of coffee machines, struggling to keep up with the tension. Gavin Roy stood near the front, flipping through his tablet, pretending to read. When Claire walked onto the stage, the murmur died instantly. She wasn't wearing her usual corporate armor. No blazer, no heels, just a navy sweater and slacks. She carried no notes. The giant Mapleworks logo glowed faintly behind her, white against the dark backdrop. She took a breath before speaking. I know most of you have heard things about me, about someone who works here. Her voice was calm, steady, but it carried something raw underneath. I won't waste your time denying what's already been twisted into headlines and hallway talk. So let's talk about the truth. A few heads lifted. Phones stopped glowing. His name is Isaiah Bennett. The sound of it cut clean through the silence. He's a technician on the night shift. He's been with this company for 3 years. Some of you have walked past him every day without ever saying his name. From the corner, Gavin shifted, jaw tightening. Claire continued. He taught me something I should have known all along, that the soul of this company doesn't live in our stock prices or our quarterly reports. It lives in the people who sweep the floors after we've gone home, the ones who fix the heat in winter, who reset the alarms, who make sure this building is ready for us to walk into every morning like it's effortless. A ripple moved through the room, some startled, some moved, some uncomfortable. I've been guilty, she went on. Guilty of believing leadership meant being the loudest voice in the room. But real leadership starts with listening to the quiet ones, the ones who hold everything up without being seen. A few people in the audience nodded, others stared blankly. One man in the second row checked his watch. Claire let the silence stretch. She wasn't afraid of it anymore. There's been talk about boundaries, she said, about appearances, about what's appropriate. But I'll tell you what's appropriate. Gratitude, respect, humanity. If those are now controversial, then maybe it's the system that needs correcting, not the people. Someone in the back clapped once, hesitant, then stopped. Another followed. Within seconds, a small cluster of applause broke out, polite, uncertain, but real. Others remained motionless. Gavin's eyes narrowed. He leaned toward the head of the PR, whispering something sharp. The woman's face paled slightly, her stylus frozen above her tablet. Claire kept going. We spend so much time building technology to connect the world, yet we fail to connect with the people standing right next to us. If we can't see each other, really see each other, then what are we even building? Her gaze drifted toward the back of the room, where a few of the maintenance staff had been invited to attend. Isaiah wasn't among them. He was downstairs, replacing a fuse that had blown on the loading dock, but she spoke as if he were there, sitting in the front row. Isaiah reminded me that kindness doesn't need permission. It doesn't need approval. It just needs courage. Her voice trembled for the first time, but she steadied it. And maybe courage isn't about grand gestures. Maybe it's about leaving a note or a cup or a word behind, something small that reminds someone they matter. The audience was still, the kind of stillness that feels like a held breath. Then Gavin rose from his chair. Claire, he said, his tone smooth, controlled. This is a touching speech, truly, but we're a financial technology firm, not a charity. We can't run on emotion. Claire turned toward him slowly, eyes calm but piercing. We're not running on emotion, Gavin. We're surviving on it. You can automate processes, outsource departments, but you can't code humanity into a balance sheet. A low murmur rippled through the room. Gavin's face flushed, though his smile never wavered. This isn't the place for moral lectures, he said. Then where is? Claire asked quietly. The silence that followed was heavier than any applause. Finally she exhaled, letting the tension drift away. I know not everyone agrees with me. That's fine. But I hope the next time you walk past someone whose name you don't know, whether it's a cleaner, a guard, or a courier, you remember that they're the ones who make it possible for you to do what you do. She stepped back from the microphone, her final words soft but unwavering. A company that forgets its people has already failed, no matter what the numbers say. No dramatic music played, no slogans flashed, just silence, the kind that meant something had shifted, even if no one could admit it yet. As she left the stage, a few stood to clap, others turned away, muttering. Gavin sat motionless, fingers steepled, eyes fixed on the empty podium. Down below, in the dim light of the maintenance level, Isaiah tightened the final bolt on a broken fixture. The power flickered once, then steadied, light spreading through the building, reaching every floor. He didn't know it, but above him, the same light was beginning to reach something far harder to illuminate: the truth. The email arrived just after dawn. Subject line: Notice of temporary suspension, pending review. Isaiah read it twice, as if repetition might soften the meaning. It didn't. The words were sharp, bureaucratic, stripped of humanity. Effective immediately, your employment with Mapleworks is on hold, pending internal review of recent conduct and media exposure. Please refrain from entering company premises until further notice. He sat in silence, the light from his cracked phone screen cutting across the small kitchen table. The coffee he'd brewed was still steaming, untouched. Outside, the city was just waking. The hum of early traffic, the low moan of a streetcar gliding past on Queen Street. Inside, it felt like time had stopped. By 7, he was at the maintenance wing, long before anyone else. The fluorescent lights buzzed above him like restless flies. His locker stood open, the door dented from years of use, stickers half peeled. He began to pack quietly, his gloves, his wrench set, a folded photo of Maya from her last birthday, smiling with missing front teeth. Andre appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. You don't have to come in, he said softly. I know, Isaiah replied, but I couldn't just leave it like that. Andre leaned against the doorframe, eyes heavy. They said it's temporary. Yeah, Isaiah said with a dry laugh. So is winter. Still freezes everything. The two men stood in silence for a long moment. Then Andre stepped closer, voice low. For what it's worth, you did right by her, by all of us, even if they can't see it yet. Isaiah closed the locker, the metal door clicking shut with a finality that echoed through the empty room. Thanks, brother, he said, gripping Andre's shoulder before walking out, toolbox in hand. The hallways were nearly empty, morning staff just trickling in. He passed a few faces that turned away too quickly. The ones who used to nod now busied themselves with their phones. By the time he reached the exit, security was already waiting, polite but firm. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. Outside, the air was crisp and bright. Toronto in late March, that stubborn mix of sunlight and frost. Isaiah took a slow breath, the chill biting his lungs. He felt both free and hollow, like a man cut loose from gravity. At home, the apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the old fridge. Maya sat at the table, her backpack beside her, cereal bowl untouched. She looked up when he entered. Dad, she said, her voice small. Mrs. Lee at school told me you're not working today. Isaiah managed a faint smile. Not today, no. Her lip trembled. Some kids said you got fired, that you did something bad. The words hit harder than the email ever could. He knelt down, looking her in the eyes. Hey, he said softly. Look at me. I didn't get in trouble for doing something bad. I got in trouble for telling the truth. She frowned, thinking, but telling the truth's supposed to be good. It is, he said, brushing a tear from her cheek. Sometimes it just makes people uncomfortable first. Maya nodded slowly, though her eyes still glistened. Isaiah pulled her into his arms. She clung to him tightly, her small hands gripping the back of his jacket. It's going to be okay, he whispered. We'll be okay. That afternoon, the sky turned gray. Rain began to fall, slow, hesitant drops that streaked the window. Isaiah sat on the couch, the laptop open in front of him. cursor blinking on an empty email draft to HR. He didn't type a single word. What could he say that they hadn't already decided to ignore? Meanwhile, uptown in the gleaming tower of Mapleworks, Claire Whitfield sat alone in her office. The blinds were drawn. Halfway, the glow of the city filtered through rain. The echo of the town hall still lingered in her head, Isaiah's name hanging in the air like a confession she couldn't retract. Her phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from PR, 1 from legal. Then a message from her communications director. Draft statement ready for your approval. Strongly advised. We issue apology to clarified leadership position. Attached was a file labeled Public Response, v3.docx. Claire opened it reluctantly. The first line read, Mapleworks remains committed to upholding integrity and professionalism across all levels of our organization. We regret any misunderstanding. She stopped reading. The words tasted metallic, sterile. It wasn't a statement. It was an erasure. The printer in the corner hummed as she printed the draft. She stared at the paper for a long moment, then crumpled it in her hand. Slowly, deliberately, she tore it in half, then in half again. The sound was sharp like ripping fabric. Katie appeared in the doorway, hesitant. PR's asking if you've signed off on the release. Claire looked up, eyes rimmed red but steady. Tell them no. They'll push back, Katie said softly. Then let them, Claire replied. I'm done apologizing for caring about someone. For a while, neither woman spoke. Rain battered against the glass, tapping like impatient fingers. Down below, the city glimmered, indifferent, endless. Claire turned back to her desk. On it sat a single sticky note, the one Isaiah had left weeks ago. Courage doesn't always roar. She traced the edges of it with her finger, as if grounding herself. Somewhere across the city, Isaiah was tucking Maya into bed, the apartment dim except for the soft glow of her nightlight. Will you go back there? She whispered. Maybe, he said, if they'll have me. And if they don't? He smiled gently. Then I'll build something better. As her breathing slowed, Isaiah sat beside her, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Inside, the silence was full, not empty, but waiting. And across town, Claire sat in her office, long after the lights had gone out in every other department. The shredded apology lay scattered across her desk like fallen feathers. She picked up one piece, read the words, "We regret," and whispered, "No, we don't." Then she turned off the monitor, stood, and faced her reflection in the glass. Behind her, the city pulsed with light, 1,000 windows burning in the rain. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of losing her position. She was afraid of losing her soul. The cafe on Augusta Avenue was the kind of place where no one looked important, and that was exactly why Claire had chosen it. Small, unpolished, smelling faintly of espresso and rain-soaked pavement. The kind of place where stories could begin, quietly before the world learned to shout about them. Isaiah arrived first, wearing his old work jacket, the one with the faded Mapleworks patch on the sleeve. He held the door for Claire when she entered, her hair pulled back, coat collar turned up against the drizzle. Neither spoke at first. They didn't need to. The air between them carried the weight of everything that had already been said, and everything about to be. At the corner table sat Donna Wu, a local CBC journalist known for her calm voice and fearless reporting. She wasn't the kind of reporter who hunted scandal. She chased truth. She rose to greet them, smiling faintly. Miss Whitfield, Mr. Bennett, thank you for trusting me. Claire nodded. We're not looking for pity pieces, Dana. Just the truth. I don't write pity, Dana replied, opening her notebook. I write people, they ordered coffee. For a moment, the world outside seemed a blur. The streetcars gliding past, the scent of wet concrete, the hiss of milk steaming behind the counter. So, Dana began, why now? You could have stayed silent, both of you. Isaiah looked down at his hands, fingers roughened from years of work. Because silence already cost us too much, he said. It cost us trust, dignity. The idea that some people matter less just because they're invisible. Claire leaned forward. They suspended him for kindness. They asked me to apologize for acknowledging humanity. That's not policy, Dana. That's a sickness. Dana scribbled a few notes, then looked up. You know this will blow up, right? The company, the investors, the board, they won't stay quiet. Claire smiled faintly. Let them talk. They've had the microphone long enough. What followed wasn't an interview. It was a reckoning. Claire spoke of boardroom culture, of how empathy was treated like liability. Isaiah spoke of nights alone fixing the same systems that ignored him, of losing his wife, and nearly losing himself before remembering that dignity wasn't something others gave. It was something you carried. Dana listened in silence, the only sound her pen gliding across the page. When it was over, she said softly, You realize what you've just done? Isaiah smiled. Told the truth? Dana nodded. Yes, loudly. 2 days later, the article went live. The headline stretched across the CBC homepage in bold, The Paper Cup Truth, a janitor and a CEO rewrite what dignity means. Within an hour, it was everywhere. Twitter, LinkedIn, Reddit, morning radio. The story of a paper cup and two people on opposite ends of power had found its way into living rooms, classrooms, and boardrooms across Canada. Comments flooded in. Some called it inspiring. Finally, leadership that remembers the human heart. Others were cruel. Manipulation 101, she's saving her image. He's playing the victim. The noise was constant. The truth once whispered had become a storm. In their small apartment, Maya scrolled through the comments on her father's tablet, eyes wide. They're saying mean things about you, Dad. Isaiah sat beside her, trying to stay calm. Don't read those, sweetheart. But they don't even know you, she protested. They said you made everything up. He sighed, gently closing the tablet. People fear what makes them uncomfortable. That's not your job to fix. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Do you wish you hadn't talked to her? Isaiah smiled faintly. No. Sometimes the truth hurts before it heals. Across town, Claire's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Her inbox overflowed. Requests for interviews, PR statements, and media inquiries from outlets she'd never even heard of. CBC wanted a follow-up. The Globe and Mail wanted an op-ed. A talk show had already pitched a segment titled Love or Leadership, How Far is Too Far? She ignored them all. By mid-afternoon, a crowd of reporters had gathered outside Mapleworks headquarters. Umbrellas pressed close as rain turned to sleet. The glass facade reflected flashing cameras. Employees peered from upper floors, whispering. Inside, Claire's assistant Katie stood at her desk, panicked. They're everywhere, she said. TV vans, bloggers, live streamers. Someone even brought a sign that says, Let her speak. Claire looked out through the blinds, her reflection merging with the storm beyond. Maybe it's time we do. That evening, she called Isaiah. You okay? She asked. He hesitated. Define okay. Maya's confused. My phone won't stop ringing. And a stranger just asked for a selfie while I was buying milk. She exhaled softly, somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. I guess we're public now. Feels weird, doesn't it? Like walking through glass, she said. But at least it's clear. Later that night, Claire sat in the dim light of her apartment, laptop open. She refreshed the article again, watching the comments scroll endlessly. One caught her eye, posted by someone anonymous, maybe an employee, maybe a stranger. They're not breaking rules. They're breaking silence. She leaned back, the words settling deep. Across the city, Isaiah couldn't sleep. He stood by the window, rain tapping against the glass. From here, Toronto looked like a constellation, each light a story, some bright, some fading. He thought about the article, about the fire it had lit. He didn't regret speaking, but he understood now. Telling the truth was only the first step. Living with it, that was the hard part. The next morning, the front page of the Toronto Star carried their photo. Claire in her coat, Isaiah in his old jacket, both standing outside the cafe, cups in hand. The caption read, Courage comes in all uniforms. And somewhere in a small classroom, Maya showed the paper to her teacher with a shy smile. "That's my dad," she said quietly. The teacher paused, studying the picture, then smiled back. "You must be proud," Maya nodded. "I am." And in that moment, far from the headlines, far from the noise, the truth felt like it finally belonged to them. It hit the internet like a grenade. A 30-second clip, grainy and dim, filmed on someone's phone in a downtown Toronto bar years ago. The timestamp read, May 2018. Isaiah, thinner, unshaven, his eyes wild with grief, was caught in the middle of a shouting match that turned physical. Chairs scraping, a glass breaking, someone yelling, "Man, stop!" before the screen went black. Within hours, the video was everywhere. News feeds filled with split headlines. Paper cup hero or violent vet, from janitor to icon, or now his past comes crashing back. The same outlets that had hailed him as a symbol of dignity now replayed the footage in slow motion, looping it between somber commentary and sensational sound bites. Talk shows debated whether his story was authentic or manufactured. Opinion pieces bloomed like weeds. Was Canada too quick to idolize a troubled man? Isaiah found out when his phone buzzed nonstop. Texts from numbers he didn't recognize. Emails with subject lines like, "Care to comment?" and "We need your side." Even Andre called, voice taut. "Man, you seen it yet?" Isaiah sat in silence on the couch, laptop open, the thumbnail frozen on his own younger face. The version of himself he had buried. The man from the night after his wife's funeral. Drunk, broken, trying to fight the world because he couldn't fight the grief inside. He closed the laptop slowly. "Yeah," he said, "I've seen it." Maya walked in from the hallway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Dad, people are saying bad things again." He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I know, sweetheart." Her brow furrowed. "Did you hurt someone?" He paused, searching for words, big enough to hold truth, but small enough for her heart. "I hurt myself more," he said softly. "Back then, I didn't know what to do with the pain, but that's not who I am anymore." She nodded, though the worry lingered. "Are you in trouble?" He exhaled. "Maybe, but trouble's just another kind of test." Across the city, Claire's phone buzzed like a fire alarm. Notifications, missed calls, press alerts. Her PR director's voice cracked through the receiver. "It's bad, Claire. Every network's got the footage. Hashtags already trending." She pinched the bridge of her nose. "What's the tone?" "Half of them want blood, half are defending him. You're in the middle of it." Meaning your silence looks like agreement." Claire ended the call without replying. She sat in her apartment, the blinds half drawn, the rain outside turning to sleet. On the coffee table, the folded Toronto Star still showed their photo, the story that had lifted them into the light now burning under the same headline that sought to destroy it. She turned on her phone camera, flipped it to record, and took a breath. No makeup, no lights, no PR polish, just truth. "Hi," she began quietly. "You've all seen the video." "I have too." Her voice wavered slightly, then steadied. "Yes, that's Isaiah Bennett. And yes, that was him 5 years ago. What you don't see in that clip is the night before, when he buried his wife after a 9-month battle with cancer. What you don't see is the year that followed, when he tried to raise his daughter alone, working double shifts to keep a roof over her head." She leaned closer to the camera. "Pain changes people. Grief distorts them, but it doesn't define them. What defines us are the choices we make after the pain." The chat flooded immediately. Hearts, angry emojis, questions flying in real time. Claire didn't look away. "Isaiah's not perfect," she continued. "Neither am I. But perfection never built compassion. The man I know is kind. He's patient. He fixes things that no one else notices are broken. Not just machines, but people." Her voice trembled now, the words cutting straight through the noise. "If that makes him unfit for redemption, then maybe redemption's lost its meaning." The stream ended after 7 minutes. No press statement, no editing, Just truth, raw and unfiltered. Within an hour, the video exploded across every platform. Twitter hashtags bloomed. Torts, paper cup, truth. We still stand. With Isaiah. Redemption is human. Others fired back. Not a hero. It's our corporate cover-up. By midnight, the first video had racked up over 2 million views. Supporters and critics clashed online, threads unraveling into thousands of comments. Some defended him fiercely. Veterans, single parents, people who knew what it meant to break under weight. Others condemned him as proof that compassion could be manipulated. In between it all, the hashtag #PaperCupTruth climbed to #1 in Canada. Isaiah didn't read the comments. He sat at the kitchen table, hands folded, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Maya slept in the next room, safe for now from the storm outside. Andre texted him a link to Claire's live stream. You need to see this, the message said. Isaiah hesitated, then tapped play. Claire's face filled the screen. Tired, but resolute. Her voice low, firm, unshaken. By the time she said, "What defines us are the choices we make after the pain," his vision blurred. For the first time that night, Isaiah let himself breathe. Across town, Claire sat by the window, scrolling through the chaos. Among the noise, one comment caught her eye. It came from a user named North Star Fixer. No photo, no context, just words. I worked with him once. He stayed 3 hours past his shift so a single mom could get home. Don't let one moment erase a lifetime. Claire smiled faintly. Sometimes the internet shouted, but sometimes it remembered how to listen. By morning, the rain had stopped. The city looked washed clean, though the headlines still burned. CBC called to request a follow-up interview. The Toronto Star ran an op-ed titled, "When Humanity Goes Viral," and on a park bench in the East End, Isaiah sat with a coffee, watching the first light stretch across the skyline. His name was everywhere, his past now public property. But inside, something had shifted. He wasn't running anymore. For years, he had fixed broken things for others. Now, with the world watching, he was finally learning how to repair himself. The boardroom felt colder than the weather outside. Snow fell softly beyond the glass, muffling the noise of Toronto's rush hour. But inside Maple Works headquarters, the air was sharp with tension. 12 board members sat around the long walnut table, their reflections fractured in the glossy surface like pieces of a broken mirror. At the head sat Claire Whitfield, back straight, hands clasped loosely on the table. She wasn't wearing armor today. No blazer, no jewelry, no mask. Just quiet resolve. The chairman, a man named Victor Lang, cleared his throat. "We're here to address the leadership crisis created by recent events," he began. "The media fallout has damaged our partnerships, spooked investors, and jeopardized our reputation. The question before us is simple. Should Ms. Whitfield continue as CEO?" No one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the overhead lights. To Claire's left, Gavin Roy leaned forward, his tone slick as oil. "This isn't personal," he said, "but leadership requires stability. Ms. Whitfield's emotional decisions have blurred professional boundaries. The live stream, the interviews, defending that man, it's compromised her credibility." "That man," Claire repeated softly. "You mean Isaiah Bennett?" Gavin's jaw tightened. "I mean the employee who nearly cost us 3 major contracts. And the same employee who kept this building running for 3 years without recognition," she said. "Don't twist humanity into weakness, Gavin." A few murmurs fluttered down the table. Someone coughed. The chairman raised a hand. "Let's maintain decorum," he looked around. "We'll proceed to a vote. A simple majority. Removal or retention." Claire didn't interrupt. She didn't plead. She simply sat there, still and composed, her eyes scanning the people she'd once believed in. Some met her gaze with sympathy. Others looked away, already calculating their next career move. The secretary called each name in turn. "Mr. Lang, remove. Mr. Roy, remove. Ms. Patel, retain. Mr. Green, remove. Ms. Lee, retain." The tally shifted like a heartbeat, up and down, tension coiling tighter with each name. When they reached Evelyn Park, the newest and youngest board member, the room seemed to hold its breath. She was known for her pragmatism, sharp, analytical, never emotional. Gavin glanced at her, confident. She had supported him in every vote before. "Miss Park," the chairman prompted. Evelyn didn't answer right away. Her fingers traced the edge of the table, slow and deliberate. "Before I vote," she said, "I want to say something." Victor Lang frowned. "Briefly, please." She nodded. "When I joined this board, I believed leadership was about numbers, about profit margins, stability, optics. But these past few weeks, I've watched a woman stand alone and tell the truth when every instinct told her to stay silent. And I've watched the rest of us confuse silence for wisdom." The room shifted uneasily. Evelyn continued, "If we fire the only person brave enough to speak honestly, then this company doesn't just lose a CEO, it loses its soul." Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like glass. "I vote to retain." The secretary looked up, startled. A murmur ran through the room. The final count appeared on the screen. 6-6. Motion fails. Victor Lang closed his folder slowly, masking irritation behind composure. "The motion to remove Ms. Whitfield does not carry," he said stiffly. "Meeting adjourned." Claire exhaled softly, the air leaving her lungs like smoke. Around her, chairs scraped, papers rustled, voices murmured. Gavin rose without looking at her, the muscles in his jaw tight with restrained fury. Evelyn met Claire's eyes across the table. For the first time, she smiled, not the polite corporate kind, but one born of conviction. Claire gave a faint nod in return, gratitude passing between them in silence. Outside, the city glowed under a fresh layer of snow. The world, for all its chaos, looked momentarily clean again. That evening, Isaiah stood alone on the sidewalk outside a convenience store, snowflakes melting in his beard. He held his phone in one hand, scrolling through the headline that had just broken. "Vote deadlocks. CEO Whitfield retains position after controversial hearing." He read it twice, the corners of his mouth lifting slowly. Not triumph, just quiet relief, the kind that hums in the bones after a long fight. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and looked up at the falling snow. Toronto's skyline shimmered faintly beyond the streetlights, each flake catching the glow like fragments of light finding their way home. A small smile crept across his face, not because the storm was over, but because, for once, it hadn't washed everything away. The change didn't come with applause. It came quietly, like dawn after a long storm, almost unnoticed, but unstoppable once it began. Weeks had passed since the board vote. Mapleworks moved through its days with the cautious rhythm of a company still catching its breath. The media storm had died down, leaving behind questions, scars, and, surprisingly, possibility. Claire walked the 12th floor one evening, her heels clicking softly on the marble. Gone were the guarded stairs, the whispers that used to trail behind her. In their place was something new, something uncertain but promising, respect mixed with curiosity. At the far end of the hallway, a new digital display glowed softly on the wall. Its title read, "Faces of Mapleworks." The first photo was of Clara Ruiz, a cafeteria cook who'd been with the company for 12 years. She stood beside her stainless steel counter, smiling shyly, her quote printed beneath, "I feed people who never see my face, but that's okay. Food still finds them." Claire stopped in front of it, watching as the screen cycled through portraits. Security guards, janitors, night shift techs, drivers. Each photo lit the hallway in warm light. Behind her, a familiar voice spoke. "You finally put them on the walls?" She turned. Isaiah stood there, wearing his maintenance jacket again. But now, stitched beneath his name, another line of text, Equity Council Co-Chair. Claire smiled. "Feels overdue, doesn't it?" "Feels right," he said, stepping closer to the display. "Most of us spent years being part of the foundation. Now, at least, the building knows what's holding it up." She watched him take in the images, the faces that had long worked unseen. They were scared, Claire said quietly. The board, the executives, they thought this would make the company look weak. Isaiah shook his head. Truth never weakens a house. It just shows where the cracks are. They stood there for a moment, side by side, the glow from the screen washing over them both. Over the next months, the Faces of Mapleworks campaign became more than a hallway feature. It became a movement inside the company. Every Friday, a new story went live on the internal network. Employees from cleaning crews, kitchen staff, late shift engineers, short profiles, portraits, pieces of dignity made visible. And it didn't stop there. Claire and Isaiah launched the Reparations Task Force, a cross-departmental team reviewing pay equity, promotion pathways, and contract ethics. It wasn't flashy. There were no slogans or press releases. Just steady work, audits, interviews, uncomfortable meetings with department heads who preferred the old silences. Some resisted. One executive muttered during a review meeting, "We're turning into a charity." Claire looked him straight in the eye. "No, we're turning into a company worth working for." By spring, the numbers started shifting. Contract renewals were fairer. Pay gaps narrowed. The company's turnover rate dropped for the first time in 5 years. Quiet victories, measured not in headlines, but in trust restored. One evening, Claire found Isaiah in the break room. Papers spread across the table. Charts, data, names. He was annotating a report, pen tapping lightly against the page. "You're still working?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. He chuckled. "Old habits. Besides, fairness doesn't fix itself." Claire crossed the room, sitting opposite him. "The task force results come out next week. You ready for the pushback?" He shrugged. "They'll say it's too slow, too ambitious, too inconvenient. But change always sounds wrong until it starts working." She smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who's been doing this his whole life." Isaiah looked at her, thoughtful. "I've been living inside broken systems my whole life. Now I just get to help fix one." The room fell quiet for a while. The hum of the vending machine filled the silence. Then Claire asked softly, "Do you ever worry they'll forget again? Once the spotlight fades? Once the next crisis comes?" Isaiah set his pen down and met her eyes. "You can't forget something once the light's been turned on," he said. "You can close your eyes, but it doesn't make the room dark again." Claire leaned back, letting his words settle. "You know, when this started, I thought we were fighting to save a company. And now? Now I think we're just learning how to be human again." Isaiah smiled. "That's the harder job." Outside the city shimmered, beneath late spring rain. Through the wide glass windows, Toronto glowed like circuitry. Lines of light connecting streets, towers, people. It looked, Claire thought, a little like the system they were trying to build. Imperfect, tangled, but alive. In the following weeks, new posters appeared across the building. Simple, no branding, no corporate gloss, just one line printed beneath the Mapleworks logo. "Repair isn't a slogan, it's work." Some employees stopped to take photos of the sign. Others just nodded quietly as they walked past. One night, long after most had gone home, Claire and Isaiah stood at the entrance of the lobby, watching the cleaning crew begin their shift. The smell of fresh coffee and disinfectant filled the air. "They don't need speeches," Isaiah said. "They just need someone to make sure the promises don't fade." Claire nodded. "Then we keep the light on." As they walked out into the night, snow melt dripping from the awning, Isaiah looked back once. The screens inside the lobby glowed softly, faces rotating one by one. Not anonymous, not invisible. And for the first time in Mapleworks' long history, the building didn't just look bright, it finally felt awake. The old brick building in Leslieville glowed warm under winter lights. Once abandoned, it now bore a simple sign, Northlight Center, for workers, for community, for tomorrow. Inside, the air was filled with the hum of quiet joy. Former janitors, drivers, and night shift staff sat beside families, refugees, and veterans. Children ran between chairs, holding paper stars. The place smelled of coffee and fresh bread. Isaiah stood at the front, sleeves rolled up, voice steady. "This isn't charity," he said. "It's repair, a space for those who worked unseen, to learn, rest, and start again." Applause rippled through the crowd. Then Maya, his daughter, stepped up, unfolding a page that shook slightly in her hands. "For the ones who worked when the lights went out, for the hands that fixed what others broke. Tonight we light a candle, a light for those who worked in the dark." The room went still, then erupted in applause. Claire wiped her eyes. Evelyn Park whispered, "It's rare to see something rebuilt instead of destroyed." Outside, the ribbon waited. Isaiah and Claire stood side by side. "Do you think justice can exist without community?" she asked. He smiled. "No. Justice is just a word until people share it." Together they cut the ribbon. The cheer that rose wasn't loud. It was full. Inside, people laughed, hugged, poured coffee. The building that had once been forgotten was alive again. Later, Claire and Isaiah stood by the glowing door. "You did it," she said. "We did it," he replied. "Every name they forgot, this place remembers." Snow began to fall, soft and slow, settling over Leslieville. The light from the center spilled across the street, golden and calm, a quiet promise that healing, like justice, only lasts when shared. A year later, winter had returned, gentler this time. Toronto's skyline shimmered under a clear night, and the city felt quieter, as if it had learned to breathe again. Inside Mapleworks' glass atrium, the once sterile digital display now showed something new. In bold white letters, it read, "Labor Dignity, Index 87.4. Beneath it, scrolled smaller lines, "Pay Equity Achieved, 94%. Internal promotions from frontline staff, 37%. Employee satisfaction, rising." Every Friday, the numbers updated automatically. No one announced them in board meetings anymore. They didn't need to. The quiet pride that filled the lobby said enough. Workers passed through the turnstiles with a nod, not rushing, not invisible. Some paused to glance at the screen, a small reminder that someone, somewhere, had chosen to measure them, not just their output. Across the river, on Queen Street East, the Northlight Center glowed like a beacon in the evening fog. Its windows spilled golden light onto the sidewalk, where fresh snow gathered. Inside, the building was alive, voices overlapping, coffee brewing, children laughing as volunteers helped them with homework. A classroom door was open, a group of new Canadians learning workplace English, their accents blending into a kind of music. Down the hall, a former factory worker taught a coding class to retirees, eager to start again. Isaiah sat outside on the wooden steps, his coat open, breath visible in the cold. Beside him was Maya, now 10, a notebook in her lap, doodling under the porch light. The hum of conversation drifted through the cracked window behind them, the sound of a place that had found its rhythm. Inside the main hall, a small glass display case stood near the entrance. Inside it sat a single paper cup, worn, creased, edges slightly yellowed, the handwriting still clear. "Don't let success make you forget how to love life." The cup that started everything. Maya looked through the window at it, then turned to her father. "Ba," she said softly, "min that su giup juoch hoa?" Isaiah smiled, his eyes following the warm light spilling across the snow. "Kong kana," he said quietly, "min chin hach honorangho van ko gia tri?" Maya thought for a moment, then nodded, satisfied in the way only children can be. She leaned her head against his arm, and he rested his hand gently on her shoulder. The air smelled faintly of cedar and fresh paint, of new beginnings built on old bricks. From where they sat, they could see the glow of Mapleworks downtown, now just one light among many. Isaiah exhaled, watching his breath turn silver against the dark. The world hadn't changed overnight. It never did. But it had shifted, just enough to make space for people like him. Behind them, laughter burst from inside the center. Someone played a guitar. A kettle whistled. The night moved softly around them, alive and kind. The camera would pull back now, rising slowly above the steps, above the roof, until the whole city spread beneath like a sea of light. And there, in the heart of Toronto's East End, the Northlight Centre burned, steady and bright. A lighthouse made not of stone or glass, but of people who remembered their own worth. In the distance, the skyline gleamed, towers, cranes, and windows shimmering like constellations. Yet it was that one building, modest and golden, that caught the eye, because some lights aren't meant to dazzle. They're meant to guide you home